Hi, everybody. We're going to start this off, talking about career counseling in general, okay? And your book's called A Holistic Approach. And so we're going to really start off talking about the historic development and some basic issues. Now, as far as career counseling, I mean, you could give it a wordy definition, but I think another way of going about it is talking about what's the specialized content within career counseling, right? And those things are going to be career choice, career and personal problems, the connection there, adaptations to change in the workplace, different multiple career dilemmas, unemployment, and maintenance of a balanced lifestyle. So these are going to be a lot of the different things that come up that you might say are the core of career counseling. And when you think of career counseling, these are the different things that you're going to try to help clients with, right? And then, a point that the book makes is that it's really devoted to developing those counseling skills for integrating career and personal concerns. So you're going to see that kind of flavor to the book as opposed to just strictly theory. Now, the historical development of career counseling has really been a product of different political, economic, educational, philosophical, social progress and change, right? So a man by the name of Pope developed 6 stages that really reflected the development of this since 1890. And these are, significant developmental periods in society, right? So stage one was 1890 to 1919. You really have this kind of like urbanization, and you have the growth of industrial organization. So, people going from more rural areas to urban areas to chase some of the different jobs and career opportunities that would be there. Stage two is like 1920 to 1939. It really marked a growth of guidance in elementary and secondary schools. I think this is really important too because depending on if you've already had intro, which I'm assuming most of you have, but maybe you haven't, if you think of some of the different ways that counseling was started in general, there was a lot of concerns around like guidance and helping individuals in schools to get acquainted with their aptitudes and things like that. So that was also an important stage. Stage three, 1940 to 1959, the growth of guidance needs in colleges and universities increased. So there's also obviously a heavy career counseling presence in colleges and universities as time was going on. Stage four um, has to do with organizational career development. And, basically, organizations started to take career development serious as opposed to just these other areas that we talked about, like let's just say maybe in school or at a college or a university. Organizations wanted to also help further their employees' career development with all this testing and different things. They started to see that as valuable to have within their own organizations, and that period was 1960 to 1979. For the fifth stage, 1980 to 1989, period of significant transitions were brought on by information technology. I think another main thing was that career counseling in private practice and outpatient services. It says placement there, but I think I meant to put patient. Um, as far as counseling becoming its own profession, even in that private kind of sector where you can work with insurance companies and things like that, that obviously changed the face of what counseling is. For stage six, 1990 to the present, this really was viewed as a time of changing demographics, multicultural counseling, development of technology, and school to work transitions. And we're really still in the throes of that, right? We are changing as a country. We are figuring out the ways to really appreciate individuals' culture while still, trying to work within our established theories that we have, changing them as needed. Technology, I mean, hey, we're probably going to be, informally at least talking about Chat GPT and all these different developments and how they're affecting the future of work. And school to work transitions are still a very important aspect of what we do, right? I mean, everybody here is basically going to school to go to a job directly after, as opposed to us, just getting out of high school or even dropping out of school and necessarily getting a job that we do for the rest of our life. So all of these periods kind of coalesce into what career counseling is, and when you take a look at the development and you think of where we're at today, all of these pockets still exist, right? I mean, career counseling is still a part of um, trying to figure out where to work in an urban area, right? Like maybe you start out with a career counselor if you're unsure where to go, or some of your career guidance that you remember came from a secondary school, or maybe it was in colleges, or you did some career development in an organization you worked at, but you kind of got to the top of where you could and weren't really sure where to go from there. Um, Information technology and all these different ways to look up jobs and stuff like that are still relevant and probably could be to a degree helping guide your decisions. And present day is just like we said. I mean, there's a lot of changes going on between multiculturally and in a technological sense, and we're trying to figure out what's the best way to serve everyone. Now, a person that you're going to want to know is Frank Parsons. He also might be on like the NCE in the future. In the sense of when you take it in the future, he certainly has been on the NCE in the past. He basically was educated as an engineer at Cornell University, but he's sort of known as like the father of vocational guidance. And he wrote several books and articles on social reform, which were a really big part of his interests and obviously helped him to reform stuff with career. But when you think of him and his interests, he was actually the lead at the Vocational Bureau of Boston. So, that organization is what it sounds like, right? Helping individuals to find jobs and match them up based on their traits and things like that. And a major book that he wrote was Choosing a Vocation. One thing that I wanted to add to this slide is a conceptual framework for his work, because I think try to just make career counseling simple. What are some of the basic ideas that you need, right? Well, first, he had this idea that you needed a clear understanding of yourself, and that could be like aptitudes, abilities, etc. Second, he wanted you to have knowledge of requirements and conditions of success, advantages and disadvantages, compensation, etc. So you really needed occupational information. And then third, you needed some type of true reasoning on the relations of these two groups of things, right? So understanding yourself and then how the occupational information was going to mesh well with everything that you know about yourself. So if you stop right there, I mean, you already have a small framework for career counseling, right? You want to know about yourself. In this case, you'd probably be helping a client to know about themselves. And then you want to also know about the environment that they're going to be working in. So you want to make sure that there's some connection between those two. So he was really responsible for starting that. Now, different associations are important if we're thinking about the history of career counseling. The National Career Development Association was very important in kind of forming the different guidelines and things that will come out about career counseling. It was originally the National Vocation Guidance Association. I think it's important to note that because the first national conference of career guidance was held in Boston in 1910. So, I mean, if you think about that, a national conference on career guidance being held back in 1910, that's pretty significant. I mean, this has been around for over 100 years when it comes to career counseling. So that means that there's been a lot of discussion, there's been a lot of changes. That's why it's really important to look back so that you can understand where we came from, what we should retain from that, and maybe where we need to go to adapt. So the National Career Development Association, though, the more modern term here, was established in the late 1900s as professionals began to meet nationally. So, basically the hope was to aid in the employment of working Americans to gain support of the federal government. After the First World War, and I just to be clear that this was actually before the NCDA, but I think it's important because these are also other times where the federal government came in. But after the First World War, federal acts were passed to assist veterans with job placement, and there was a lot of test development going on at that time to help those veterans learn their aptitudes and where they might fit in well. And then if you think also after the Second World War, women replaced men in the workplace, and the GI Bill of Rights passed. So you had a lot of social reform going on, and you also had, once again, this federal support in terms of like monetary support in order for individuals to get placed in the workplace. So when the NCDA was established in the late 1900s, they were also probably looking to be a part of this process where the federal government helps to allocate funds for different career endeavors. Now, the NOICC is the National Occupational Information Coordinating Committee. Their purpose was really to develop occupation information systems for each state, assist in the organization of state committees, assist all users of occupational information to share information, and then provide labor market information for the needs of youth. So this is really important because now you actually have an organization or committee in this case that's really creating systems of information that's going to be useful, right? Now we're going to be able to know what kind of jobs are in the states, maybe other relevant occupational information like how much money those jobs are making, what are going to be jobs that are important for the youth coming up. When you're in the throes of a career, you may or may not be considering this information. I know there was times where I was not really considering that information, but when you have it, it can really enlighten the choice that you make. So I think this is a pretty significant development. And it was, so much so that it was established by Congress in 1976. They also created the National Career Counseling and Development Guidelines. What guidelines were we going off of up to a point, right? We had different pockets of organizations and things like that, but what were really the guidelines that career counseling were following? You need organizations like this to come together and create that foundation for future career counselors. And in 1992, they also developed the National Career Development Training Institute. Once again, just pointing out for these things, I don't expect you to remember it for an exam or anything like that. It's just to help solidify that these type of organizations really make career counseling what it is today by providing guidelines, training, education, right? This stuff doesn't just come out of nowhere. So I think it's important just to briefly mention it. Now, the book talks about basic issues in career counseling, much like we mentioned early on in the beginning as to what defines it, but this is getting just a little bit more specific about basic issues. So I want to run through these because I think it's going to give you a flavor of some of the things that we'll talk about and consider in this course, and really why career counseling can be helpful. So, first of all, it's the case for the individual, right? So career counseling was founded on the basics of individual differences in assets and strengths. In general, right, we're trying to figure out what the individual has and brings to the table. A lot of times when people are lost on their career, they don't really know what they're capable of. So that's a big part of career counseling. And there's also, this eventual shift from vocational to career counseling, which suggests that we're now talking about a purposeful life pattern through work. I think that's a big thing because it's easy when this first started to just be like, okay, well, we just got to match it to a career. And now we're trying to expand on that. We're trying to say, well, how can we increase that well-being throughout your entire life, right? So speaking of that, getting beyond like just the individual, that career life perspective is its own kind of basic issue. You want to look at the relationships between all life roles. And then Donald Super, who you're going to learn a lot more about, really suggested that people are involved in several life roles simultaneously, and that success in one role influences others over the lifespan. So, when a client comes in, they might think that their current life role is problematic in and of itself, and maybe it's the case that let's just say they're talking about being a child, a son, a daughter, whatever. Maybe in some way that's affected by their career. Like, do they feel that they have not become a real, child because they didn't attain some level of success in their career? Or it's, maybe they're a parent and their job has taken up too much time and they feel like they're not successfully being a parent. So really quickly, it can become the case that you really need some type of like career life perspective, trying to understand how to manage these and how these type of dilemmas have been resolved for people, or how they perpetuate. So as far as career choice, that'd be like the third basic issue that they discuss in the book. So similar to the individual part, right? We look at the individual strengths, values, interests, abilities, but I think we're just saying this emphasis here is like career choice itself is its own kind of issue. So it's going to take into account those strengths, but then it's also going to take into account like the changing dynamics of the global workforce. So career choice then doesn't just come down to your individual constraints, but it also comes down to what else is going on in the environment that's going to influence that. So career choice is its own process that needs to be discussed. And then working in the 21st century is the fourth issue that they talk about. And it's just this idea that work provides not only income, but personal identity. I added a bullet point here because they also talk about knowledge workers and temp agencies. I think it's really important to keep this in mind. Knowledge workers, right, as opposed to like maybe a blue collar job where you're getting in there and doing some kind of labor. knowledge workers are really popular in this day and age, and we have to figure out how do we navigate the education that we need and turn that into a career, and how do we stay abreast of the knowledge that we need for the future, you know? So this is really important. I mean, even us as counselors, fortunately, it seems like these relational jobs aren't just going to be instantly replaced by AI. But what if you're somebody that's going into a particular tech, field? Not to say all tech's going to be replaced, but a particular tech field, and your job is going to be replaced by AI. I mean, that's really important from a career counseling standpoint. Why would you go through 2-3 years of maybe, let's say, a master's degree education for it to then just be replaced? So this is really important when we're working with our clients. And temp agencies are interesting. It seems like the book was making the case that even the pattern of getting employees to do a job sometimes is outsourced by these agencies, and how benefits are given is problematic. And it's just, in the 21st century, there's so many different options than in the past, right? So you just got to be knowledgeable about that. Another issue is really lifelong learning. The forecast of a changing workplace underscores the need for developing lifelong learning plan. I mean, I don't know. I can relate to that for myself personally. I mean, just having went to college, undergrad for psychology, master's degree in counseling, and then, almost finishing a PhD here in counselor education and supervision. There's just been so many different skills that I needed to learn along the way and apply, and I feel like I'm still learning. So, I mean, I'm sure you guys can relate too. I'm curious to hear throughout the semester just the different backgrounds that you guys bring to the table and how that's changed. I think that's one thing about this class is that it's going to connect to you. You're going to think of other people that you know, and you're going to be like, oh, they just told me this the other day. And your job as a counselor is to really build that wisdom up to help guide them to facilitate things like lifelong learning. And I just put this quick bullet point that accumulating work experience is also valuable. Once again, if you're a career counselor and somebody's coming to you, what are you advising them to do? Like, what if they have no work experience, right? I would say one of the biggest things that I've learned is experience is so valuable. Even sometimes when you have a degree, if you don't have experience, it can be really difficult to get a job. So I feel as though as a career counselor, one of the biggest things you're asking somebody is like, what experience do you have on paper? Very important. So then, counseling in a culturally diverse society, the counselor must understand culture and a multicultural society, right? And what does that really mean? I think, they do a good job in counseling programs, and I could say for Penn West, because I went here, talking about multicultural competency. So I just gave that quick bullet point that's described in the book of self-understanding, right? That's kind of where we start. We also acquired knowledge of the client's culture. And importantly, you still have to consider the within group differences and view the client as a unique individual, So you might know something about somebody's religion and how that might influence their decisions, but it might be their choice that they don't want to follow it sometimes, or they do want to go against it. So, you have to take into consideration the individual above all, while still being knowledgeable enough that you don't make kind of like an obvious blunder or offend somebody. So talking about these basic issues here, global and economic restructuring, we're really in a global economy nowadays. A lot of economic, political, and social interconnectedness. I think there's, been a lot in the news about different things. One thing happens in some part of the world and the U.S. is affected, or vice versa, right? So disruptive economic events in one nation definitely affect another. Something to think about when, you're going for a certain career, right? Number 8 is effective use of career information. There are now a variety of career information resources. So this brings us to have to know the different sources and to have the skills to really parse through it. And, something that's going to happen along the way, as you'll see, is when you're working with clients, a part of this process is positive and negative reactions, having discussions with others, shadowing, internships, and apprenticeships. I mean, even for you all, right, as you're going to be doing internship, or maybe you've already done some, that's going to be very meaningful information as to what you like, what setting you like to do, what job you like to do. I know when I did an internship with Penn West to get my educational specialist certificate in school counseling, it was the first time that I ever knew that I could have really seen myself working in a school. Prior to that, I really hadn't considered working in like a middle school or an elementary school, or even high school for the most part. But when I had an internship, it changed my perspective. So once again, as a career counselor, you know that there are certain things that could really influence somebody's impression of what they want to do, and you try to help put them in those positions if they haven't done so yet. And the last one that's also really important is integrating career and personal counseling, right? Counselors must understand both career choices and personal decisions, and mental health, personality disorders, logical thinking, all of those things are going to need to be considered. So, like for example, different personality traits can sometimes be predictive of success in certain careers. So, as a career counselor, if we are aware of all of these different things and we have a client in front of us, if we know the right assessments to do, if we know the right mental health diagnoses to maybe assess for and talk about how that could affect their career pattern, we're going to be in a much better place to help this person feel satisfaction in their career, right? If we just miss something because we're not aware that the depression or anxiety or whatever else they might be going through is going to be a meaningful deterrent for a certain career, then we might miss that opportunity to help the client. So, in summary, I just think that career counseling was created to meet the demands of an ever changing society. You have industrialism, war, social reform movements, studies of human development, the growth of urban areas, federal acts. All of these things have contributed to the growth of the profession. So, going forward, we're really going to talk about some of the different theoretical models now that are used in career counseling. And after that, we will get more into the practical models.